Today we got Chad Thorchain Bull. He's going to tell us what it's like to be a Rune whale. And we got our classic abs. You don't have any abs.
No, there's a treadmill behind me, so I'm trying.
Oh, dude, good stuff. Good stuff. Working on getting those abs. So what's up, guys? Everyone's seeing this Rune price bump. It's nuts in hand. I know you guys are excited, especially Thorchain Bull. Can you give us some deets on what's going on? What's the latest updates with Thorchain? Well, first, actually, before we get into that, tell us about yourself, man. This is mainly directed towards Chad.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. By the way, TCB is saying he doesn't see the chat open, so hopefully he can figure out the text participation. But yeah, as you were touching on, super exciting times for Thorchain. I mean, it feels like the moment we've kind of all been waiting for. The moment that I thought was going to happen, 2-3 years ago. We got a little ahead of ourselves, but extremely exciting times. I mean, just in the last week, man, has it even not been a week since streaming swaps launched? So streaming swaps is a huge thing. We'll get into that, I'm sure. And then literally as of today, the long anticipated lending that we've been, dreaming about for a year plus is literally launching today. So, and that'll burn Rune. And so, yeah, just extremely exciting time. So yeah, that's why it seems like the market's kind of reacting to that.
Yeah, streaming. So tell us a little bit about streaming swaps. I've made some threads, and maybe some people have seen some stuff on there. Maybe not. Oh, and by the way, guys, Thorchain Bull, he's anon, so he's just going to be chatting. We're still working on the quirks right now. He's going to be chatting on the main chat on YouTube, but working on getting that done. But anyways, tell us a little about these streaming swaps. Like, what's the sauce on it? Why is it so much better?
For sure, yeah. I'll kind of assume that your audience you've covered Thorchain and Thorswap a good bit, so I assume they kind of understand like the rough basics. Cross-chain liquidity protocol allows you to swap from native Bitcoin to native ETH and 8-9 other chains, all of that. So mainly what streaming swap solves is it really makes Thorchain seem as if it has a lot more liquidity than it has. So basically, in the past, whales have been pretty limited from using Thorchain. We never really saw $1 million swaps, things like of that range, because you'd be disrupting the pool balance so much that your slippage fee just made it like completely a non-starter, right? But what a streaming swap does is a streaming swap allows you to send in a giant swap. And basically what happens is instead of that entire swap happening immediately, the inbound comes into Thorchain, and Thorchain trickles that into the pool currently up to 24 hours. That could be customizable in the future, but for a really large swap, it could be up to 24 hours, and it's just trickling that huge swap into the pool. So you're not disrupting the pool balance. Arbs are coming in and fixing these tiny little discrepancies in the price throughout the whole swap instead of this one huge splash in the pool. And that allows for the whale to get really good price execution on par with centralized exchanges pretty much. So, really opens up Thorchain, Thorswap, everything we're doing to much bigger volumes. And like I was saying, I think it was 6 days ago this launched, unless my weeks are getting blended together, which is possible. And the volumes are just, it's happening. Like, this is the feature. I mean, this is like, I think the most exciting thing that has really happened for Thorchain, because it just immediately opens it up to accepting huge volumes, and we've seen that immediately. Like the overall Thorchain volume is going crazy. The Thorswap volume and affiliate revenue is going crazy. So and you're seeing a lot of newcomers coming into Thorchain and doing some pretty giant swaps. So definitely a huge game changer.
Is this specifically for Thorswap?
No, streaming swaps is at the Thorchain protocol level. Okay. But Thorswap has so far pretty much, I don't know if anyone else is currently live, but there are definitely going to be others that are able to offer streaming swaps. Yeah.
Okay, because I know they had TGT as another interface, kind of like on the phone. I wasn't sure if they implemented that yet.
I know they are.
Okay.
I think it's coming out. If it's not already out, it's, I think, like supposed to be this week. So they will have it, and yeah, others as well. So that is just open at the Thorchain level, but Thorswap, is typically kind of first to these things, and built a pretty good experience around it. Already shows up well in the tracker. So yeah, I think so far the bulk of the volume has been through ThorSwap, but there's definitely been people just interacting directly at the Thorchain level too.
So is this a type of thing you look at it like real yield for the protocol, or what is this? Like what would you consider this?
It it's very similar to how swaps always were. So the pool fees would basically go into the LPers, which now also funds the yield for savers, right? The single sided yield. So this just does the same thing. It actually lowers it in some ways, right? Because you're just taking a very small liquidity fee through the swap and letting it trickle, but it makes up for it in size, right? So I believe
Okay.
it's shooting for 5 basis points, 0.05%. And at least that's what the interfaces are currently doing, is kind of splitting it such that it's targeting this. But yeah, so to put it simply, the more volume that's running through Thorchain, it is all good for the LPers. And when I say LPers, I'm including like savers and everything with that. So yeah, it's basically just feeding yield to the LPers and the savers. The more volume that runs through it, conceptually the same as regular swaps.
Okay. Okay. And then if you take a look on ThorSwap, this is, can you guys see the screen? Let me make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of like the breakdown of like where the swap is happening and basically what's going on. But then you have this network fee, which is obviously the network fee. And then you have this exchange fee. It shows here that 75% of the fees are given back to the VThor stakers. Is this just because there's like an affiliate on ThorSwap, or is this like on all the other protocols? Because I mean, if I'm looking at this looks like as there's more volume happening on ThorSwap, which you can see here, this is ThorSwap volume and this is Thorchain volume, like Thorchain as the chain itself. You can see here that there is a lot of volume happening, and when there's more volume, there's more fees going to the protocol, which of these fees, these are given back to the people who are staking, and you have a 38% staking APY right now.
Yeah, that's one of the really interesting things with streaming swaps is that so far it's proving to be arguably more lucrative for the front ends, for the interfaces, than even for the protocol. Not that it's bad for the Thorchain protocol. Obviously it's great, but it's really incredible for the front ends, because the front ends charge an affiliate fee based on the volume of the swap. And historically, if you had gone to do a $1 million swap, the slippage would have been $200,000-$300,000. So that swap wouldn't have happened. But now the slippage is down to, like negligible. So the platform fee, the exchange fee, in this case, that it's that ThorSwap, that's a Thorchain level referral fee being paid to ThorSwap because ThorSwap is the interface. That's now the bulk of the fee. Just yesterday, actually, ThorSwap just released like a whale tier, because that they charge 30 basis points, 0.3%, and for these new whale swaps, that can add up a bit, if you're doing $1 million plus swaps. So $1 million plus swaps now automatically just get half that fee, so
That's sweet.
0.15%.
Yeah, and then also if you're staking Thor, you actually get trading discounts.
Right. Yeah. So there's VThor tiers, and that applies to whales too. So like, for example, if you're in the tier that reduces your fee by half and you're doing a whale swap, they would both apply. So you'd still be getting a further discount. So yeah, it's really just to, like you said, like that fee is now pretty substantial for platforms, which is great for interfaces because it allows interfaces to, create revenue. And in the ThorSwap case, 75% of that is going to stakers through VThor. But at the same time, this new feature allowed the whales to come in. They're already getting a massive savings. So we're seeing them, just lining up to pay referral fees, because it's still creating a really good rate for them. But at the same time, like, we definitely want to make sure that fee doesn't end up now being the deterrent now that the slippage fee has been solved. So yeah, it's good to see that coming down, especially for the whale swaps, because we've already seen there's this one, I'm sure TCB's
Yeah, he just chatted about it. Is he saying TCB, do you mean $1.1 million in Bitcoin or 1.1 million Bitcoin?
That's in dollars. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I was like, Oh, geez.
We haven't we
That's
haven't
a
seen
lot.
a million Bitcoin swap. That might take some time for the liquidity black hole to play out for us to see that. But yeah, there was that swap of I guess it was about $1.1 million value of BTC. But yeah, if you
Yeah.
tried to just do that through the regular pool, slippage would have crushed you. That swap would have never happened. But yeah.
Yeah, you can see that. And I was showing earlier in the slides like a comparison using something like Rocket Exchange and then comparing that to Thor swap. The streaming swaps are just so much more capital efficient. It's way cheaper. And on top of that, it's like almost a no-brainer, especially if you're
Yeah.
a whale. Being that you have less gas fees. I mean, we already have. Let me show you guys the gas. Well, actually, it doesn't really matter because it's a streaming swap. But if I was to do this network fee right here, well, yeah, this is going to be on ETH. So most of these fees right here, let's see if it'll show the details. Yeah, so this is mainly your gas fee on ETH right here. It's basically the $13 that you're going to be paying. Now, you and I both know, and Abs, and Thorchain Bull, in a bull run, the Ethereum gas fees can be a couple $100. And if you're making several swaps, like streaming swaps is doing several swaps for you, it's going to save you several $100. Actually, maybe even several thousand, depending on how you're
Right.
swapping that.
So a key thing there is that before streaming swaps, what whales would do is they would just split it up manually. That's what you're getting at, is they would just fire off, 5, 10, 20 swaps potentially. But the issue with that is then every single one of those is just its own swap. You're paying the full gas in and out on every single one. Whereas with this, you're paying the gas to get it in. Thorchain's handling it all, and then when it's all finished and ready and packaged up, it all comes out in one shot. So you're still just having like the single way in and the single way out with this. So yeah, that's a big savings. One thing I should also clarify, just in that ThorSwap UI, what you're showing right now, if people can see, when we're saying streaming swaps, the way that's displayed on at least the way ThorSwap is showing that's the price optimized route. So now when you mock up a swap, you'll see price optimized and you'll see time optimized. Time optimized is just the old way, just sends in the single swap. Price optimized is the streaming swap. So it'll show you like the time difference between the two, and it'll show you the price difference between the two. And streaming will take longer, but give you a better rate, and vice versa for the other.
Yeah, and on top of that, you don't have to sit at your computer like you can see here. The streaming swap will take 20 hours. You don't have to sit at your computer for 20 hours.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so
you don't have
it's like
one signature on the way in. I mean, in this case, like this swap that you have queued up right there, like you would just need to send the BTC, a small BTC fee just for the send in, and everything else happens on the back end. Like, you don't need, in this case, you wouldn't need any ETH, you don't need any Rune, you don't need to be signing things the whole time. Like once the swap is fired off, it's on its way. One thing it can, so with streaming swaps, there's a price threshold that's set when you fire it off, because you're streaming this over a long period of time. Yeah, you're streaming this over a long period of time, so you are exposed to some market volatility during that time, which can work in your favor on the upside. If the price moves in your favor, you can end up getting more output. But on the downside, you set a threshold. You can set to have no threshold and just say,
so it's a threshold, not slippage.
Right. I think currently in the UI, I haven't actually played with it, but I think it's just set by using slippage. I believe. I hope I'm not misspeaking there, but I think you just set it through your normal slippage fee. But basically, if the streaming swap is occurring, let's say you're doing a big swap and it's doing 50 sub swaps. What could happen is like it could complete 17 out of those 50, and then the price has moved outside of your threshold, and those sub swaps won't fulfill because of the price guarantee that you accepted. So in that case, what can happen is you can end up with partial fills. You would just get some of your from asset and some of your to asset, but that's really just for your own price protection. You could set that to not, if you just wanted it to be fulfilled at the pool rate, you can set that. And there's going to be more customizability in the ThorSwap interface. Currently, the interface is just giving you like an optimized recipe for your streaming swap based on the pool depths of the pools you're using, based on the size of your swap. But really, these things are actually customizable at the Thorchain level. So yeah, you could set, just like fully just stream it, and then if you for sure just want it to be fulfilled, that can happen too.
So this is a question for both TCB and as well as you. I don't know if you run a node or not, but what is it like to run a node? Like someone's getting these swap fees. Like it's almost like a Amex, Visa, Mastercard. They get like those bare bone minimum on like the credit card processing fees. But once they interlay with like Square, Stripe, or whatever, they're also getting a cut. So I look
Yeah.
at ThorSwap like Square, Stripe, and then I look at Thorchain, like the actual protocol itself, the bare bones minimum, like your Visa, your MasterCard, Amex. Like I look at them as the base layer. Does or do all those swap fees or 50%? I know they have like an incentive pendulum where a portion of that goes to the people who are providing liquidity, which, yeah, it'll show up on the dashboard. A portion of the yield goes here, and then a portion goes to the nodes. Like, what's it like to run a node? I've LP'd before, and people can see the yields here, but I'm curious about the node.
Yeah, TCB will have to chime in on that one. I don't run a node, though I would love to. But yeah, he's in the chat right now. But he's saying it's currently at about a 14% ROI. And the cool thing with running a node is it's just Rune. You're not.
So
you're
there's
not
like real
LPing.
yield too.
Yeah. So the thing is, so when we were talking a few minutes ago, we were talking about how the yield from swaps pays the LPs and the savers, right? So what's actually happening there is it's paying into just the total protocol income, and then that protocol income is split between the LP side and the node side, and that's based on the incentive pendulum. So fluctuates somewhere around 2-to-1 nodes to LPs to down to, I think currently it can be as low as 1-to-1, but I think it's still, TCB can correct me if I'm wrong. It used to always shoot for 2-to-1, but that has, some of those things have shifted a little bit over time. But yeah, still most of that yield goes to node operators, and they are just getting it in pure Rune. So that's just Rune on Rune. It's essentially it's proof of stake, proof of bond. I mean, they're literally just running full validators. There's not delegated. It's not delegated proof of stake like other things where you just stake $100 or whatever. Like you have to run a full node, which is currently like 900,000 Rune. At today's prices, that's what, $1.4 million or so. But yeah, what TCB is popping up right now,
900K Rune.
Yeah.
So is that why these guys are on standby right now?
Yeah, there's a limit on how many there can be, and that's limited just by Cosmos itself.
This is where he said, "Oh, okay. Here's the bonding APY." He just said around 14. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. That actually, I think it was just at 20 really recently, but I think the pricing changes and all that have affected that a bit. So yeah, because part of it still comes from reserve emissions of Rune, but recently more of it was coming from the real yield. Though I wonder at the current Rune price, it might have dipped back to below the majority, just because now Rune is starting to go up again. So there's kind of a dynamic there between like how much is the real yield worth versus how much is Rune is worth. But overall, it's trending in the right direction over time, where more and more of it's going to come from real yield.
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, I guess that would make sense. Like the pendulum seems to be swinging towards either it's swinging towards the nodes or just a bunch of whales are accumulating right now. Like if you look on MEXC and Binance, the funding rates are massively negative. Basically, it's paying like 700% to be long Rune. And either it's people because they're massively shorting Rune, or people are massively spot buying this Rune, or it's both, which in my opinion, I think it's both, because you can clearly see here that people are stacking up Rune and queuing up in order to get one of these nodes, one. And two, if you look at a lot of the channels on YouTube, and I think Thorchain Bull made a tweet about this as well, there were some massive shorts out there, and people are kind of fading the run up. It's almost like, oh yeah, this is run up like 50%. I'm going to short it. like that type
Yeah.
of thing. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. Thorchain Bull just said Rune is massively being shorted right now. We had quite a good rally, so I guess some TA influencers are shorting us. Yeah, I think I saw it on Crypto Banter yesterday that they were like, "Yeah, I'm fading this. I'm gonna short
Yeah.
it." So I don't know how that went, but
I mean, what people need to realize is like there's just been massive shifts in how it's actually functioning and like the actual protocol revenue. So like using ThorSwap as an example, I think the same kind of applies because literally streaming swaps came in and revenue 10x plus for this is just for Thor and VThor specifically. But the price of it has, I don't know, 4x or so. But it's like, okay, the revenue's up 10x. And definitely not financial advice, but like just you can't necessarily short something just because it's up if there's like been fundamental changes, right?
oh
Not always a
yeah,
good idea.
like this
So,
price
and the same
is
is happening on the Thorchain level right now. I mean, the volumes are exploding. It's really like having its time of taking off. And this isn't even factoring in everything we were already excited about. You know, ledger integration, trust integration already landed. Lots of other partner integrations. I mean, this thing is going to be powering everything, and then swap volumes across all of crypto are going to explode at some point, and then the values of those assets being traded are going to explode at some point. The value in the Thorchain pools is going to be very different at some point, and that has a direct correlation to Rune. So there's so much to be excited about, and that doesn't even touch on lending, which is going to start burning tons of Rune. So yeah, I think fundamentals outweigh TA in these situations, and I mean, Rune's at what, $1.40, $1.45
I mean,
right now. I mean,
what
it was
I
that
what
a
I
few months ago.
yeah, what I say is, I mean, like I understand why people short, but I don't understand shorting crypto. Like you look at this chart and you're like 14 days. Okay, well, that's nuts and ham. But then you go max and it's like, oh, okay. So I mean, like you could short it, but your downside is basically infinite because let's say this ends up going to $2, $3. By that time, you're probably going to be liquidated, but your upside is capped. Like the lowest this can go is 0. So I mean, it's not like a meme coin to where you can have infinite upside. And I don't know. I don't
So
understand the
Yeah,
thesis
personally,
behind
I'd never
shorting,
short
but
anything.
yeah, so I'm a TA head. That's the reason why I got out of Bitcoin when I did during the run up in 2021. But I was just looking at the current price of Rune, and it looks like these are almost rock bottom prices. I mean, the lowest I ever went to was what, 76 cents.
Yeah,
So honestly, the bullish case about this is that you guys are building like crazy. I mean, not you guys, but I'm saying the devs and all that stuff in the project itself. Um, but yeah, this is kind of massive. And considering
100%.
the
I
price
mean,
was at $20, like that's the all time high, and it's at $1.50. I mean, macro wise, like you guys need to realize that millionaires and fortunes are made during the bear cycle. This is potentially a big opportunity.
yeah,
yeah, I'm grateful for it. TCB and I both, neither of us were super early. I mean, I know TCB has said like he bought the majority of his Rune, like, I don't know, somewhere from $5 to $12 or something like that. And same for me. So, I mean, yeah, seeing it go down to the 1 range was wild. And really, I mean, in hindsight, I think I'll end up being really grateful for that time because I have more Rune than I had back then. So ultimately, a good spot to be. But yeah, I agree.
So curious on your thoughts on the Thorchain ecosystem tokens. I know there are a couple of ones. Obviously, we just talked about Thor. What are your thoughts on like TGT? I don't know if you would consider XDeFi a Thorchain ecosystem token. I mean, based on this recent price bump, they're probably like, hey, it's a catch-up trade. And then you also have XRune. And then I think you were talking about another one. It was called CoinBT. Was that it? Yeah, CoinBot.
Coinbot, yeah.
Basically like
CoinBT is the
Unibot,
ticker.
but multi-chain.
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff. I do just want to say, yeah, like when I speak on these, it's totally just my personal opinion. Like I definitely don't want to I'm rooting for anything that's related to Thorchain. Like I'm rooting for it. But yeah, personally, I don't have TGT. I did have XDeFi. I don't currently. But absolutely still rooting for those teams and those projects. I think they've built solid products, but I don't think the sometimes the tokenomics have worked against some of them, and sometimes the adoption has worked against some of them. So I'm personally not in those, but definitely still rooting for them from the sidelines. I personally am in Coinbot. I'm really excited about Coinbot. Coinbot was like, I basically dreamed it up. I'm not that I didn't start it or I'm not involved with it, but I was dreaming of this idea. Like when I got really excited about Unibot about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I was like, wow, this could, there's at least some chance that this Unibot thing is like a new way of interacting on chain and swapping, right? And got me really excited just how easy it was, seeing all the yield that they were generating, seeing all the excitement. And over time, it seems like people are just still using it or using it more. And similar to how you had Uniswap and then you had Thorchain. And when I heard about Thorchain, I was just like, oh my God, this so it's like Uniswap, but 100 times more powerful potentially, like clearly. And then, so when I saw Unibot as a Thorchad, within 5 seconds, I was like Unibot, but Thorchain. And I was just like calling it Thorbot, like hypothetically and stuff like that. So when I saw this Coinbot thing come out, I was just like, hell yeah, this is so what I wanted to see. So yeah, personally, I am in that, and I'm pretty damn excited about it. Definitely following it very closely. Seems to be some Thorchain OGs behind it, and they're shipping like crazy. They've delivered a lot in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, anything could happen. It's super small, super risky. Definitely has a long way to prove itself. But
yeah,
I think it could be something.
I think it's just going to be reflexive to, well, actually, it might just be a catch-up trade. Like if Unibot stays pumping and doing well, especially the bot narrative. I mean, you told me about it, and I was like, yeah, I can see this having legs. I did grab a bag. Thankfully, I did. Good call. But here's a comment from Thorchain Bull, basically talking about Thor. I have the same feelings about Thor. Like, I think Thor is probably one of, in my opinion at least, the best altcoins on Thorchain, but maybe I'm just a bit biased because that's just like the main UI I've always used. Like I haven't personally used TGT or any of the other protocols. I mainly specifically go through ThorSwap whenever I make swaps. And I know they recently did like an airdrop. I think it was a month ago, if you simply just used it. But are there any other protocols we kind of didn't mention that you think are under the radar on the Thorchain ecosystem that could potentially do something?
I think we hit the main ones, to be honest. But yeah, I think I'd have to say Coinbot feels the most under the radar, which is with how new it is and how much people haven't even necessarily investigated it yet. And it's got, these exciting tokenomics, essentially the same as Unibot, which creates a lot of yield for it. And I think more importantly than that is the usability. I mean, you should just try a little swap. Just create a test wallet on it and just try some swaps, because one of the biggest complaints about the Thorchain ecosystem over time has been UI UX usability. And ThorSwap has done incredibly well at improving this over time, but the multi-chain UX is not just twice as hard as single chain UX. It's extremely complicated because you have all these different wallets, all these different chains, all this different gas fees and refunds and things failing for 1,000 different reasons, and it is really complex to use. And that's why I think that's been one of the things holding back Thorchain. And at the same time, there's always been this concept of Thorchain is the back end, right? Like Thorchain could be the liquidity backbone of a centralized exchange even. And along this whole time, that's what ThorSwap has been building, this thing called SwapKit. And SwapKit is what just plugs in all the ThorSwap, Thorchain functionality into other apps. And so that's what Coinbot is using. But with Coinbot, because it's, somewhere between Thorchain is way on the decentralized end of the spectrum, and a centralized exchange is obviously on the other end of the spectrum. Coinbot is not nearly as far on the decentralized end of the spectrum as Thorchain directly, of course, because the keys are in Telegram, and they're working on things to improve that a lot. But what that gives you is a massive advantage, which allows you to just it removes all the complexity of using it, because you can literally just tap on the asset you want, and like boom, a Thorchain swap is fired off and it's done.
Yeah, there's a video
There's none
of
of
you
this like,
doing it.
yeah, there's none of this connecting wallets. It just works, and I think it's personally one of the most exciting things I've seen in Thorchain in a long time, just because it makes it, I mean, it's literally something that like anybody could use. It makes it really accessible. And I think the narrative of Unibot but Bitcoin, Unibot but Doge, Unibot but everything, a trading app that's right in your Telegram, and you can have all these features that aren't possible on something more ThorSwap-esque with like your own wallets and such. Like in Unibot, you could set up copy trading and all these other sorts of things. And there's a lot of potential features that Coinbot could do that you wouldn't necessarily see on other Thorchain interfaces because of the way the keys are managed. So that means you could be doing like, you're familiar with Rango Exchange? Like these more, so that sort of aggregation is like stringing together a bunch of transactions, right? And that gets cumbersome because you have to sign every step of the way.
Yeah, that's annoying.
You need gas. Yeah, you need gas on these middle chains. And that's something ThorSwap and SwapKit have always been kind of against, is like, okay, no, let's just get the routes that we can give an amazing experience around. But what's really interesting to me is something Coinbot could do is, because they can basically manage the signing, you could have like a Rango-esque route be fired off in a single tap on Telegram. Even in like automated copy trading sort of ways. Like, I don't know, it just gets really, really interesting to think about what's possible in the Telegram world. And there's trade-offs, like I said, there's security trade-offs, and I think they're working on a lot of stuff there, but still a pretty exciting use case if you ask me.
Yeah, so I have a question about just the DeFi aspect of Thorchain. So where can folks find new up and coming, because you mentioned a few that's being built on Thorchain itself. Where can folks find, because I'm on DeFi Llama and I'm only seeing Thorchain and then ThorSwap. Is there a better place that I can kind of keep up to date with this?
So the thing is that Thorchain is not a smart contracting L1 that things are built on directly. Mm-hmm. It's more that these things are interacting with Thorchain. Thorchain is this middle layer. It's its own chain that manages assets on native Bitcoin, native ETH, native Doge, native Avalanche. And so nothing is actually built on Thorchain except Thorchain. So even ThorSwap, like ThorSwap's token is an ERC20, and ThorSwap is an interface that allows you to interact with Thorchain, but it's not directly built on it. So you won't really see like the way you could like look at Avalanche and like look at all the top projects on Avalanche. You won't really see that with Thorchain, because these projects could actually be on other chains and just utilizing Thorchain.
That's interesting. So who do you think that the competitors of Thorchain, if you can name like top two? I'm trying to think.
Binance. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think it's more of a competitor to the centralized exchange world than anything. I mean, even more so than other DEXs, because other DEXs haven't really tried to tackle the same thing. I mean, of course, there's bridges, and bridges work. You could use bridges in aggregators, but they have a very different economic risk profile, a very different decentralization profile.
Yeah. I think bridges are going to be obsolete probably next time around. It really shouldn't be. Like, how many bridge hacks have we had in the last 2-3 years?
Tons.
Yeah, it's very rough, and of course, like Thorchain has its own Thorchain has gone through its own security hurdles, building something incredibly complex, and security it's the biggest security problem in crypto to solve, and Thorchain has clearly been leading that for like years. So personally, I don't really see anyone else too close. I mean, yeah, TCP is mentioning Layer 0 and Stargate, but yeah, those have their place, and you'll even see that integrated in ThorSwap pretty soon, which is going to be really interesting. Basically, it's just exchanging the USDC across these different chains, and that's going to allow you to string together, still in one transaction, ThorSwap style, go from, say, an Arbitrum token to native Bitcoin in a single signature, and vice versa, which will be really cool, because then you're stringing in Layer 0 integrated chains that are not integrated in Thorchain. So that's I'm kind of seeing that personally as a new era of this a little bit. Not to be overly dramatic, but it'll be cool because you'll get a Thorchain like experience with chains that are not even in Thorchain. So I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I actually made a thread on this a long time ago about the difference between the layer zero as well as Thorchain. The biggest thing is it's going, in my opinion at least, it's going to be complementary. So Stargate creates the layer zero for assets that have smart contract capabilities, whereas like Bitcoin, XHV, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, like all these other assets that don't have smart contract capabilities, it's going to be best to route through uh, Thorchain. And that was just kind of like the thesis on it. I see them as complementary, mainly like Thorchain for the short tail, and then Layer Zero for like the long tail assets. So this would like be bridging, I don't know, just random
Yeah,
altcoins on different chains.
that gets into DEX aggregation as well, which DEX aggregation has been, one of the most tremendous features for Thorchain. We can get into that. I want to touch on what, just on that last topic, what TCB is mentioning in the chat is the community. He's saying the community tends to dismiss other bridges because they're more centralized, but the market has not been willing to pay a premium to swap in a trustless environment. I think
Yeah.
that's really key because that is why you saw and still do see larger volumes outside of Thorchain, even though Thorchain is, this more perfectly idealistic, like the right way of doing things. Ultimately, users are price sensitive, and it's like if you want people to eat healthy food, you need to make it taste good. You don't just need to tell them that it's healthy, right? And it's kind of the same thing.
And
It's
it
like if
needs
you
to be
want,
cheaper.
yeah, it needs to be cheaper too. So that's the thing here is like if to use the food analogy, if you have food that is cheaper and tastes better and it just happens to be healthier, that's the way you get people to eat it. So that's what I think Thorchain is doing now with streaming swaps. And I also even think like this layer zero integration on the Thor swap side kind of plays into that too, because it gives you the best of both worlds. And, no one like you shouldn't be an LP for these wrapped tokens or something like that, but to interact through a bridge very briefly and get good price execution and then get out, within a couple of minutes on the other end with your asset. Generally, people are pretty comfortable doing that. I've definitely, I'll definitely do that when I have to. I'll definitely use the layer zero integration through ThorSwap for sure once that's out. But yeah, I think that's a huge key is like the way to make this happen is to make it competitive, and it's really getting there. And even streaming swaps, like it's still going to improve dramatically when there's more liquidity, because like, if you mock up 100 BTC swap right now versus a 10 BTC swap, you'll still see the 100 BTC swap is going to take considerably longer and all of that. Whereas, at 10x the liquidity, an 100 BTC swap ends up being like how a 10 BTC swap is right now. So
Got it.
still, yeah, I mean, over time, it's should just be better and better. And, really the vision is for Thorchain to set the prices of these assets, not to be arbed to these assets. And if that's where the bulk of the liquidity is, and that's where you can get the best rates, then, then Thorchain basically sets the price of Bitcoin, hypothetically.
Got it. So to summarize, you're basically saying Thorchain is having this moment right now to where streaming swaps has the capability to bring Thorchain to the masses, because now people are not going to things like 1inch or any of these other aggregators or even centralized parties, because now streaming swaps creates a competitive pricing model to where it can actually compete with these other guys and still offer a better product.
Yeah.
Because like normally in the real world, if you want to eat healthy, you have to spend more. So that's why people, it's not the only reason why people eat unhealthy food. It also tastes good. But if you have a comparable product with comparable pricing, people would choose the better alternative.
Right. I think
So
there's a lot of whales out there that, assuming the price execution is pretty close to the same, they would much rather not go through some KYC, centralized exchange, hope that they get approved to withdraw, the hope they don't get stuck. Like, I think there are definitely a lot of users out there that prefer the decentralized ethos, of course. Like, that's why we're all here in the beginning, right? So I think that's what we're starting to see. That's why, like, I'm sure if somebody did some on-chain sleuthing, I would bet that a lot of these large streaming swaps are people that have essentially never used Thorchain before, or maybe they've done some like small swaps here and there, but like this just opens up a new category of user.
So, question on this volume here. I know some people are testing these really large stream swaps. Do you think that is like natural and organic, just people trying to test this, or do you think it's like the team like, hey, we have this new product. We know you're kind of buds with us. Why don't you try doing some volume? Just asking, like, out of curiosity, like, is this organic volume, or do you think this is something that's been um, placed?
Yeah, I haven't really even thought of that, but I assume it's organic. I mean, I haven't seen any chatter around stuff like that. I know very early on the Thorchain Treasury did a couple of the very first streaming swaps, and they announced this publicly to so people could track them going through. And if anything, I feel like there's probably big players that are just dipping their toes in right now and trying to, make sure everything's go smooth and then use it a lot more in the future. So yeah, I don't see any reason to think that this is not organic volume.
Yeah,
Other
let
than
me just test to
even
see
the
if this $1
Thorchain.
million just won't like fade into an oblivion.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that if you look at it's been up only in terms of like usage in the first week. Yeah, what TCB is saying exactly. There were the first couple of days it was like, oh my god, there's a 100K streaming swap, and then it was like, okay, there's $1 million streaming swap. Oh, there's
Yeah.
a $2 million. Like, it seems like it's just people, like any product. I mean, obviously, like lending is about to be. You kind of tiptoe in at first. You do things in a controlled environment. You wait for other people to see that it's working, and in a lot of cases, right? And I think with streaming swaps, it's just gonna like spread like wildfire because people are gonna see like, oh, I got this great price execution. Now I'm comfortable doing even larger size, or I'm confident telling another whale that this worked great. And look, there's an option now. We can swap BTC to ETH. Circling back to that for a second, like I really do want to iterate. I think streaming swaps competes more with centralized exchanges than other dexes because, yeah, if you want to swap millions of dollars of Bitcoin, what option do you really have? I mean, you could wrap it and go to Uniswap, or
Yeah.
you could do stuff like that. But I think that those whales are always going to centralized exchanges. And so this is really like a completely new option.
So is this part of the Len or Thorlen, or is this kind of just like earning? So because I remember they implemented this a while back, but I wasn't sure if this is part of ThorFi. Well, I
This
guess it would
is
be because
you,
it's
yeah,
sponsored.
you could, I would consider Saber's part of ThorFi. I mean, depends how you want to define ThorFi, I guess. But you might be thinking way back, there was this design iteration like 18 months ago that savers and lending were going to be like connected to each other in a very like directly, the loans were going to fund the savers yield. There was this whole thing where they were going to be completely coupled together.
Right.
That's not the design we ended up getting. So savers has been around for what, I don't know, 6 months now or something like that.
That's this, right?
That's what you're showing right now.
Got
On
it.
ThorSwap. That's earn. That's Thorchain calls them savers vaults. ThorSwap calls it just earn, just to make it simple. But that's just single-sided yield. Deposit Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, backed by the liquidity pools through synthetics. But yeah, so that you could call part of ThorFi, and then but lending in that, I mean, of course it's all related, but there's not like a direct relationship between the two.
Got it. So on the back end, like what happens here if like I deposit 1 Bitcoin in here? What happens?
Yeah, basically you're minting a synthetic, so your Bitcoin's going into the pool, and then you are getting a synthetic Bitcoin that is backed by that value worth of the pool share. So your Bitcoin goes into the pool, ARBs can correct the price. You're minting a synthetic Bitcoin from Rune, and then your, let's call it SBTC, your synthetic BTC is redeemable for 1 native Bitcoin from the same pool. So there's always that value in the Bitcoin Rune pool to be drawn upon by the synthetics. So you can think of savers just as synthetics, except they're synthetics that are earning a share of the LP yield. So there's that full system income. Some is being split to the nodes and to the LPs. And within the LP share, it's being split between the regular LPs and the savers. the savers are getting a lower proportion because they are putting their risk onto the LPers. So it kind of leverages the LPers by allowing the savers to only have the single asset price exposure.
Got it. That makes sense. So with the introduction of lending, what should we expect from this? I've been seeing some stuff on Twitter, basically saying like, hey, you can lend out some Bitcoin, ETH, whatever, and you can borrow up to, I think it was 50% of it. And if like really the only risk is if Bitcoin just giga pumps. Like in I didn't really understand it clearly. Like I remember researching this like 5 months ago, 6 months ago when it was being talked about, kind of like rumored on what they were going to be doing. But what did they end up rolling out as concrete?
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Honestly, it's very complex. I'm refreshing myself on it too because I felt like I had it all down like 6 months ago, and now it's here, and I need to hone in on the mechanics. So definitely don't take my word as 100% truth here. Go read the docs, but I'll do my best to reiterate it. But yeah, so what you mentioned is correct. It's going to start at, they refer to it in CR, collateralization ratio, but personally, I think people are more familiar with LTV, loan to value.
Yeah.
Basically, it's going to start at 200% CR, which means 50% LTV. And that will be the best rate that anybody gets. And over time, this is customizable. Basically, it's going to float from 200% CR at the opening to 500% CR to be capped out. And that's just to 200% CR is 33 LTV, sir. Oh, I guess I'm off on that. My bad. My math is that right?
200% collateral is 33%. I don't.
No, I think
That
it's 50%.
sounds like it's, yeah. I think it's 50. I don't know though. Actually, I think there's a tool for this. I remember looking.
I'm pretty
at
sure it's. I think 300 would be 33%. Yeah, I think 300% CR would be 1/3 of that is your collateral to your loan, or your loan to collateral. Anyways, we'll let the chat correct us on that. But conceptually speaking, it's going to start at 200% CR and it's going to max out at 500% CR. And that is to basically effectively control how enticing the loan is, right? So how many people are going to take the loan? If the CR goes up, it's obviously going to be less appealing at that point, because at that point, for every $5 of Bitcoin, you're only borrowing $1 instead of $250, right? So that's what kind of keeps the stability and the security in check. And also, the higher the CR, the more of a ratio, let me see if I get this right, the more of a ratio between like the collateral versus the loan amount, therefore more Rune is burned per loan amount. So that's really good for the protocol. Like the higher the CR, the safer, because you're getting a lot of Rune burned and a little bit of Rune minted. Hypothetically, at like a 1-to-1, you're essentially burning and minting equivalent. That would be at 100% CR. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, your Bitcoin goes in, and that Bitcoin is swapped to Rune, and that Rune is burned. And then on the loan side, that amount of Rune, that value of the loan is minted and swapped to your destination asset. So the net burn is the difference of the collateral versus the loan. So that's why, like I said, the higher the CR, the more net Rune has burned. And then that gets into the opposite, which is what you were talking about, is when is it bad for the protocol? So when it's bad for the protocol is if the asset, like the Bitcoin that was deposited, outperforms Rune. Because let's say it outperforms Rune by a 2x,
you gotta buy it back.
Then if you close that loan, you would be minting more than you burned. But again, that's why it's key that the higher CR minimizes that hit, right? So
that makes sense. Okay. So I guess in general, I know you are still getting a refresher on it. What excites you the most about ThorFi and Thorchain lending being implemented? It looks like TCB likes this game plan. deposit ETH, get USDT, deposit USDT for yield.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely going to be a rush on it, because the product, like if you just like moving past the mechanics and the complex stuff, like what really matters to most users is obviously like, do I trust this thing? And is the product appealing to me? And the product is the most appealing product of all time. I mean, you literally just like, you have full access to 100% of your collateral. You have 0% interest on that. You can do whatever you want with the loan. The main things to factor in, there's slippage fees, because on the back end, you're doing like, just to make it simply, you're basically doing a handful of swaps on the back end, all these synths being burned, swapping to Rune, back and forth, blah, blah, blah. So you're paying a good bit of slippage opening and closing these loans. And in crazy volatile times, that could go up a lot on closing your loan, which could give you a haircut for sure. But in normal conditions, yeah, you're putting in Bitcoin and you're borrowing up to 50% of that, and you have no obligation to pay that back. You have 0% interest. So super appealing. I mean, clearly people are going to like beat down the door to get that, because yeah, like TCB said, you could just, lever up, basically get free yield on something. Obviously you're exposing yourself to protocol risk with your collateral, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like a free look to the upside, because if it goes to the downside, I mean, obviously you're going to have like penalties, like 50% is just going to be vaporized because you're LTV. But still, you have basically a free look. Like if Bitcoin giga pumps, well, it's just a win-win for you. And if it giga nukes, well, you already got your cash out. So it's like, who cares? I don't know. It's pretty interesting. But
yeah, I don't even think I said no liquidations in that explanation I just gave. But yeah, clearly, obviously that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, no liquidations is massive. But I guess outside of that, like if people are buying Rune, like for me, I've just held Rune for like 2 years. I wish I had staking, but I saw some tweets last night with Thorchain Bull. He was talking about, obviously I'm kind of like a peanut, like compared to everyone else. I don't think mine would really matter, but it looks like you can delegate your Rune to someone on a node. Is that like, how does that occur? Like, is there a UI to do that, or is this kind of like a handshake type of deal?
Both are true. It is there. You can do it through the ThorSwap interface. There's a bond area. I believe it's headed under advanced. You have to turn on advanced stuff. But the thing with that is, like I said before, is Thorchain does not have your regular delegated proof of stake. So this is not like your typical, just like bond to a validator. This does require more trust, but not entirely. My understanding of it is if you delegate, here? Yes. Okay. So you can delegate with a node, but it's definitely should be somebody you trust. There definitely could be scammy stuff popping up. So definitely do your research on like if you want to do that. But my understanding at this point, with the way the whatever they're calling it, like the collaborators on the node is set up, I don't like the node operator can't just like run away with your funds, but they still could like misbehave and allow your bond to be slashed. So you are relying on them, but you're not. It's definitely not the same as just like sending somebody your Rune and having them start a validator with it. It's definitely safer than that, but it's still not like something that you can just openly trust on, because there are risks for it.
So basically, if I have some Rune, I would just copy any of these addresses. Hopefully, someone who's on Twitter or in the Discord group, someone that I can kind of trust, and then I would just come over to Thor. Oh yeah, I'm on it.
Well, you have to. TCB can chime in here on like the exact mechanics, but you definitely have to be like whitelisted of some sort. Like I'm pretty sure the node has to accept you, right? Like they have to like. They have to expect that so you can't just like go into that list and just bond to a node, but that is how you would do it once you like have a handshake deal with a node, essentially. And yeah, I think there's currently a limit of like, again, he can correct me on this, but I think it's like 10 depositors. So generally they'll have, looks like yes, you need to be whitelisted, and yes, it's 10. So nailed it. So yeah, what I was going to say is like, generally they come up with minimums, like I think TCB has said like generally 50K rune or so. And that's just because you only have so many slots on the node. You can't be taking, 1,000 rune from people because it's just not going to make a dent in the total node. And yeah, the standard is that the validator gets 20% of the yield, 80% goes to the delegator. And that's because the node operator has infrastructure costs to run. They have either cloud hosting to pay, thousands of dollars a month to run that node, or they're running bare metal and they had all those costs as well. So
yeah, I saw one earlier in this chat. I saw this one 3 to 4K a month. I think there was another one he talked about 900,000 or something, or no, maybe that was something else. But yeah, so
900, that was about the value of a node recently.
Oh, gotcha. Oh,
TCB
yeah,
says his bare metal setup costs 6 figures. Is that for one? That's got to be for a few of
What's
them,
a
right?
bare metal setup?
That's when you're literally running like your own hardware. Like you literally have, you literally own the hardware itself versus
so not AWS, right?
Exactly. Like this is literally either like set up in their own facility or like potentially partnering with some kind of like server operation to like literally run your own hardware 24/7.
What about a 10K rune bag? Is there anyone accepting like a 10K, or is 100K like minimum, or 50K?
There could be. I mean, it definitely depends on, the node and what they're willing to expect. Like it's there's nothing technically stopping them. It's more just like what makes sense for them. So, if you were friends with a with a node operator, I'm sure they would, like, there's nothing stopping them from accepting. TCB says he's taken as low as 20K to top off a validator. So yeah, really no like set rules on that. It's just kind of like the general practices based on, again, like there is that 10 wallets per node limit. So
Gotcha.
just yeah.
So going back to, where is it? I think it's this one. What do Thorchain, what do you mean by Maya in our own facilities? I heard about that last night. I thought it was some sort of protocol or something. Someone said they were locking it up in Maya and getting it back in like 2025. But
so I can start here, but Maya is a Thorchain fork. So that's a separate protocol that he's referring to. Maya is, it's a Thorchain fork. It runs some chains that Thorchain is not integrating, basically. So it's a friendly fork for sure. They just launched Dash. I know they're launching Kuji. They have Rune, so you'll probably see Rune savers on Maya, which is kind of interesting. What else do they have so far?
So when did that fork happen?
It probably launched. It definitely launched like this year.
So we could have some free tokens on there potentially, or it wasn't a hard fork.
I haven't even checked. I mean, there were definitely there was all kinds of stuff going on. I'm not an expert on Maya, but I don't know. I don't know if just holding Rune qualified you or if you had to do some other things. Honestly, I don't remember. Maybe I have some tokens.
Well, I mean, if it's a hard fork, you theoretically would have.
It's not a hard fork, I don't think, because it's like it can't fork the assets in Thorchain, right? So it's really just forking the infrastructure layer of Thorchain,
Gotcha.
right? Like it's forking the functionality of Thorchain, but then creating new pools and all of that. But there definitely were some claims on Cacao's token for, LPers, or like I think even there were definitely. I just don't remember the exact qualifications, but
what's the ticker symbol?
Cacao, CACAO. If you were TCLP, you got Maya. Yeah, Maya airdrop.
Oh, sweet. Okay, where do we claim that?
I don't know. I'll have to check too. I never checked if I. I don't even. I'll have to. Maybe I got some free tokens floating out there. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully there wasn't like a claim date or something. Maya protocol.
They're trying to add things that Thorchain isn't adding. So I think like Kuji is coming next, I'm pretty sure. So that's kind of cool to, have a link to the IBC world.
So what is, and just talking fundamentally and kind of at a 10-foot view, right? 10,000-foot view. Just wondering if what's down on the pipeline for Thor. Thorchain? Is it kind of like, is there anything like huge that's coming out? I know you said the recent one you guys were talking about streaming, but is there any other roadmaps that could potentially be that are going to be worked on? Because I know you guys are thinking, stream was one of the biggest things you guys are waiting for. What is the next big fundamental upgrade?
Yeah, I mean the huge one really is lending, which is literally launching today.
Okay.
That's one of like the core amazing things that Thorchain has set out to do from like the really early stages.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of see it as taking back all the things that got hijacked by centralized exchanges. It's like, okay, taking back trading, taking back single-sided yield, like Celsius style, and then taking back lending. So yeah, I think those are some of the biggest DeFi pillars that really exist. But they're definitely still looking at more to come. But I think I'll touch on those in a second. But I think before that, teams like ThorSwap, others building out this DEX aggregation, building out, getting L2s coming in. I think that's really exciting. Also really exciting is getting this infrastructure as the backbone of existing apps is extremely exciting. We've seen that play out with Trust Wallet. We're seeing that play out with Ledger. And that's just going to be, in my opinion, the first couple of dominoes in getting the entire industry to be running this liquidity backbone to allow swaps, the whole package, like all of these features can be integrated into all the other apps. Still all benefits back to Thorchain being this invisible backbone. So I think that is always one of the North Stars. But as far as other exciting features, what else? I know they're poking, or the core devs have been looking at perps potentially. I don't think there's any final design on that, but that's on the table. So leverage within Thorchain, leverage trading could be cool. Limit orders is another one. So being able to place on-chain limit orders, that I believe that code is like done. There's just not even any interface doing it yet, but it's not live in the protocol. But I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we see that roll out. Like maybe that's the next thing to roll out in the relative near term. And then, yeah, I think at least that's all I can think of as far as like big things. Obviously, another part is just more chains. So BSC integration is done. It almost launched, but then like we were getting into with the incentive pendulum earlier, there just wasn't space in the pools. Like nodes needed to catch up, and that's why nodes were being extra incentivized. Now, hopefully, with the way the market is looking, that should be opening up a lot of space in the pools, so we'll probably see Binance Smart Chain integrated in the relative short term, near term ish, and hopefully more chains in the coming 6 to 12 months to just keep it relevant as far as any major important liquidity source.
So you touched upon partnerships with like integrations, right, with BSC. Is it kind of like, I'm trying to think of this as like a service, right? Is that the angle as well as what Thorchain is looking to do? It's a dumb question. Maybe just let me know if it is. I'm trying to think.
I'm not sure I fully understand that.
So when you were talking about earlier, it was one of those questions where I said, well, you basically said like the integrations with BSC, and you're also talking about integrations with potentially other blockchains. You said there was no DeFi, right? I think that was the section I was kind of bringing that up. What's gonna bring? And forgive me because I'm trying to
no worries.
Be with Rune. I'm really really new with this, and I'm interested. It's just that I'm trying to understand this further. When you guys are integrating with BSC, what does that really entirely mean?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great question, and yeah, I'll dig into this for a minute because when I talk about integrations, there's really like two sides of it. Mm-hmm. One is Thorchain bringing in a new chain to be able to allow for all of these features we discussed to apply to that chain as well. So, for example, like swapping BTC to ETH, then you add AVAX. Now you can swap BTC to AVAX, AVAX to ETH, AVAX to BTC. You can do DEX aggregation, you can do savers, you can do lending on every new major chain, major asset that's added, right? So, when we see BSC integrated into Thorchain, then that means, a pool will be created for BSC, BNB, probably potentially BSC, BUSD, and those pools will live on Thorchain. So they'll be paired 50% with Rune. The Thorchain validators will control wallets and assets on that native chain. That's what it's doing for all of these chains. It's running nodes on those chains, and then it's controlling wallets on those chains as a decentralized group, essentially, to be able to send assets in and out on different chains. That's the problem that Thorchain is really solving at its core chain level, is monitoring and controlling assets on other chains. So that's integrating into Thorchain. Like, you bring in, hypothetically, Monero, and then Thorchain controls vaults for XMR, allows you to swap in and out to all the other assets. The other side of integrations is getting that whole infrastructure to be the backend behind other dexes, other wallets, other Telegram bots, even potentially centralized exchanges, allowing all of these platforms to tap into that liquidity, to offer those swaps. And Thorchain is built for that. Like, Thorchain does not have its own interface. That's why you see other projects like ThorSwap, XDeFi, Coinbot, TGT. They are plugging in the Thorchain infrastructure, building on top of it in terms of like ThorSwap with DEX aggregation. But then that can be packaged. Well, first off, those interfaces, Thorchain is designed to allow those interfaces to earn revenue off of that. And that goes back to the affiliate fees we were talking about earlier. So it's all built in to allow them to build sustainable businesses and projects on top of Thorchain. So that is the other side of integrations, is you get that whole engine and you plug it in to Ledger. So then you open up, hopefully soon you open up Ledger Live and you do a swap from Bitcoin to ETH, and from your ledger to your ledger, and that's using Thorchain on the back end. So that is like the other side of integrations, getting this backbone to power everything.
Interesting. So
that is huge.
So is that kind of what I remember back in the day? Like it took some time to get UST and Luna integrated on the platform. Was that because they were trying to get like the wallet set up with the nodes, or?
Yeah, there's definitely heavy lifting on just the technical side of integrating chains, because fundamentally Thorchain is solving a very complex security problem, right? Like, it has to be monitoring and controlling wallets on chains other than its own. And all of these chains have, different block times, like all the parameters are different on all these chains. And it has to keep time, essentially. Like, it has to keep track of what's happening on all these chains and all these wallets, and basically do the accounting of that, such that it needs to know that I received in, AVAX, and you want to receive out Bitcoin. So we need to make, there's all the confirmation counting, and then how long is this going to take? And there's a million things happening. There's Rune moving on the back end to rebalance the pools. But to do these integrations, there's definitely a heavy lift on the dev side. But there's also one of the big limiting factors has just been on the economic side. And that's why we didn't see many new chains launching throughout the bear, was like TCB said, it's 3, 4, 5K a month to do cloud hosting for a node. And, last bull market, if you're making, 50K a month, then it doesn't matter to spend 3 or 4K. But if you're making 5K and you're spending 4K, and then a new chain is going to cost you another 1 or 2K of cloud, AWS costs, the economics weren't quite there for the nodes to take on more, more bandwidth, basically, because they literally, every node has to run a node of the chain that's being integrated to be able to perfectly monitor what's happening. So yeah, it causes a lot of like infrastructure bloating, and it causes just costs. But I think as you see, things kind of surging back, hopefully we'll get into a season of some more chains coming in. But you're never really, as far as at least the way I see it, you're never going to see like chains launching all the time, just because there seems to be some like inherent maximums on like how much it can handle. So better to integrate all the most major stuff and let DEX aggregation do the rest.
Right, and that's kind of what I was thinking, like with Layer Zero and Thorchain. Thorchain being the short tail, like your Bitcoin, ETH, your majors, and then Layer Zero takes care of the miners. Because you also have to factor in all of these tokens are paired with Rune. So if you pair with the token that just goes down in price, it's going to bring the rest of the LPs down. So I mean that's just something to think about. And the reverse is true. If you pair with something a strong asset, it's also going to bring Rune up.
For sure.
So do you know much about Maya protocol at all?
Not a whole lot. I just haven't had the bandwidth to like really follow it, but I know like the core mechanism is Thorchain's core mechanism. So really, I think their whole thesis is just to kind of be a sister to Thorchain and help take some of that infrastructure off of Thorchain and like be able to build a second Thorchain essentially that can kind of take like the second tier integration. So that you'll likely see them integrating stuff that Thorchain is not integrating. And over time, you know, you could potentially see aggregators stringing the two together, right? You know, to go through hypothetically, like, let's say hypothetically that Maya does Kuji and figures out the whole like IBC stuff, then maybe you're able to string that together with Thorchain and ThorSwap. And, you know, I don't know if that can be done in a single transaction. That might have to be two transactions, but ultimately to string all these things together just allows more routes and more chains to be covered by having multiple teams kind of working on the same overall design. Like you'll basically Maya waits for Thorchain to prove something and then takes that and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like Thorchain is still the source of like all the new stuff, and then it will basically trickle down to Maya integrating it.
Got it. Okay. That makes a little bit of sense. So I guess for Thorchain itself, or I guess, yeah, I guess for Thorchain itself, what are we looking at for the future? Like what are you guys thinking about the future of Thorchain? There's mixed opinions on Twitter. Some people think it's a flash in the pan. It's an old coin. It's not like the new ones. Just kind of, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's just hooked me more than anything in crypto ever has. Like it just seems to be solving the most fundamental problems. Like it's literally, we literally went through this era of crypto of centralized entities solving all of these problems for us. And rather than actually building the crypto infrastructure in the crypto world, it was like crypto assets in the centralized world. And to me, it seems like Thorchain, the oldness is an advantage. Like it's solving a very old problem. Like nobody solved this when there were only 3 or 4 name coin like this was back then. Like nobody, there was no decentralized way to swap between any of the top assets, right?
Right.
And ultimately, Thorchain solved this very old problem of just like a way of trustlessly, trust minimized, decentralized swaps between, I always refer to it as quote unquote incompatible assets. I think that helps it click for people, is like you can't just trade Bitcoin to ETH. Like that's not something that ETH does, and that's not something that Bitcoin does. Like you need something to solve that exchange. And that's what a centralized exchange did. And that's what Thorchain built in a decentralized way. And I think that's super important to keep all of crypto open and trustless and, you know, no KYC and no borders. Like it's really fulfilling the on-chain crypto world. And that includes trickling down to other products beyond just trading. Savers, you know, that's what people go to decentralized things for. You know, all the ones that blew up where people wanted to earn Bitcoin on Bitcoin. So you lock it up with, you know, whoever, and you hope it's okay. Well, this is rebuilding that product on chain. Same thing with lending. Obviously, we've seen DeFi lending work, but that's always on single chains. So to be able to do that with native Bitcoin, with ETH, with, you know, Doge, with anything, I mean, really really important things being built. And then just, yeah, these features making it so much more accessible, like streaming swaps. And the tokenomics of Rune are fascinating. I mean, they've always been top tier tokenomics. That was something that hooked me early on, just thinking through like how well thought through the security design of Thorchain is, but then how well thought through the Rune asset itself is directly tied to the success of every aspect of the system. Like, it's really, these guys are from a different planet. Like, it's really fascinating. So yeah, I think from here, I think I'm excited to see how lending goes today and over the coming weeks and months. I'm excited to see streaming swaps go from $1 million swaps being exciting to $1 million swaps being happening at every moment of every day. I'm excited to see opening up Ledger Live and, people streaming $2 million of Bitcoin right within Ledger, hopefully. Yeah. And I just think the ethos around Thorchain is one of the most crypto. It's as crypto as it gets. And I think that's what's really hooked me.
So they got a space on that tonight, don't they?
It's in
lending at 6.
Yeah, 6 Eastern. Lending launch Thorchain space on the main account.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, drop a link on that, and I'll go ahead and add it to this video as well. But where can we? We're rounding up on the hour. Well, actually, a little bit over. But I mean, where can we learn more about you, Chad, and where can we learn more about you, Thorchain Bull?
Yeah, for me, I mean, just Twitter really, at Chad Thoreau. TCB's is at Thor Maximalist, I believe is his at. And yeah, that's really the best place to see what I'm up to. But follow. There's so many great accounts to follow in the Thorchain space. I mean, definitely TCB is a big one. Obviously Thorchain, ThorSwap, all the ecosystem projects. If you start there, you'll end up finding all the right sources. But there's plenty of Discords to jump into to learn more. There's ThorSwap and Thorchain Twitter spaces pretty much weekly. So there's always a lot of places to learn more.
Yeah, simply just search hashtag Rune and you'll get everything you need on Twitter. But yeah, guys, hey, I appreciate you jumping on. Abs, did you have anything left to say? Chad, anything left?
No, I think I'm very bullish on Rune now. I just have to build that bag.
Rune bags.
Let's go. Now's the time. It's happening.
Hey, as always, we close it out with a wisdom one-liner. Today we're in Proverbs chapter 12, verses, we'll do 16. Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. Dude, that's so true about being patient. Be patient, man. Well, I mean, it's not being patient, but like if you think about it, someone is just doing something on purpose to annoy you, especially like when you're talking with someone on the phone. And it's like, I'm busy right now. But I mean, I don't know. It's probably what they want you to do. Anyways, guys, thanks for jumping on. I'll drop those links in the description below so you guys can check out Chad and Thorchain Bull. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next one.